Welcome, everyone. Today we're taking a deep dive into a truly haunting case, the 1977 Oklahoma Girl Scout murders at Camp Scott.
Yeah, it's one that really lingers. We've looked through the materials you shared in news reports, that personal reflection, the overview, and the aim here is to really distill what happened.
Exactly. We want to piece together the timeline, look at the evidence, and, explore those questions that still surround it without getting lost in absolutely everything.
Right, connect the dots, basically. Understand why this specific case still resonates so strongly after all this time. It's not just about the facts, but the impact.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It's June 12th, 1977. Camp Scott near Locust Grove, Oklahoma. Summer camp's just starting.
Over 100 Girl Scouts there, ready for fun. But that very first night, it turned tragic. 3 young girls from Broken Arrow.
Lori Farmer, who was 8, Michelle Guse, 9, and Denise Milner, 10. They were killed.
They were staying in tent number 7 in what was called the Kiowa unit. And that location, it was a bit isolated from the counselors.
Yeah, closer to the showers, unfortunately.
Which played a role in the discovery the next morning.
So, June 13th, a camp counselor heading to the showers finds... Well, first, she finds a body in a sleeping bag in the woods nearby.
Horrifying. And then it quickly became clear Lori, Michelle, and Denise weren't in their tent. Tent 7 was empty.
Their bodies were then found together on a trail that led to those showers, about, 150 yards from their tent?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And the way they died was just brutal. Strangulation, bludgeoning, and sexual assault.
Just awful. So the investigation starts immediately right at the scene. What did they find initially?
Well, near the bodies, a couple of things stood out. There was a red plastic flashlight, but it was, modified.
Modified how?
It had a piece of garbage bag taped over the lens. And inside, newspaper was stuffed in there, maybe to stop the batteries rattling.
Strange detail. Anything else right away?
Not immediately right there, but it was that flashlight
Yeah.
and the tape.
Yeah.
That became really significant later.
Okay. How so?
Well, just a few days later, some squirrel hunters gave the police a tip. They'd been in a cave nearby. Okay. And inside that cave, investigators found a roll of masking tape and stuck to it. A tiny piece of plastic.
Let me guess.
Yep. An exact match to the tape on the flashlight found near the girls. The type of tape, the fractures in it, even the newspaper stuffed inside the flashlight seemed to match stuff found elsewhere connected to the cave evidence.
Wow. So a direct physical link between the crime scene and this cave.
Exactly. Forensic work really connecting those locations. It starts to build a picture,
Definitely. But it wasn't just tape in the cave, was it?
No, that's right. They also found 2 wedding photographs.
Wedding photos. That seems random.
Well, it wasn't random for long. When those photos hit the news, someone working at the prison recognized them.
Recognize photos. How?
Apparently, they'd been developed years earlier by an inmate named Gene Leroy Hart as part of a prison work program he was on.
Gene Leroy Hart. Okay, so who was he?
He was a local guy, and crucially, he was a fugitive. Escaped from the Mays County Jail back in '73.
And why was he in jail?
He had a serious record. Kidnapping, rape convictions. He was serving a long sentence before he escaped.
So finding items linked to him, especially things potentially tied to evidence like that tape near the crime scene.
It immediately put him right at the top of the suspect list. A known violent offender escaped, possibly leaving evidence nearby.
And that kicked off a massive manhunt.
Oh, yeah. One of the biggest in Oklahoma history, apparently. Lasted about 10 months.
10 months? That's a long time. Where did they find him?
Finally caught him in April 1978. He was hiding out in a cabin deep in the Cookson Hills.
The pressure on law enforcement must have been immense during that time.
Absolutely huge. The community was terrified. His capture felt like, maybe this was it. Maybe justice was coming.
But the trial, it didn't go as expected.
No, not at all. Hart went on trial in 1979. And his defense, they argued he was framed.
Framed? How?
They suggested that the evidence in the cave, the tape, those photos, had been planted there specifically to implicate him. They claimed he left the photos years before after his escape.
Trying to create reasonable doubt.
Exactly. Saying, look, maybe he was near there once, but this specific evidence linking him to this crime, it was planted.
And the jury?
They deliberated for over a week. And then, not guilty.
Not guilty. I can't imagine how the families felt. Lori's mom, Cherie Farmer, has talked about that moment. Just devastating.
Utterly devastating. And the judge actually said something to Cherie Farmer afterward, something like, sometimes the guilty go free.
Oh, wow. That's heavy. Acknowledging the gap between suspicion and legal proof.
Right. It didn't offer much comfort, I'm sure.
So Hart was acquitted of the murders. What happened to him then?
Well, he wasn't free. He was sent straight back to prison to finish his sentences for the earlier kidnapping and rape charges.
Okay.
But then, just 2 months after that acquittal, he died. Had a massive heart attack while exercising in the prison yard.
2 months later. That's
Yeah.
abrupt.
Yeah. It added another strange final layer to it all. The local sheriff at the time was apparently totally convinced Hart was guilty. So, acquittal, then sudden death. It left things feeling very unresolved.
Definitely. But the case didn't just die with him, did it? People kept looking for answers.
No, it didn't stop. Over the years, other ideas, even other suspects, popped up. There was that instance mentioned in one of the articles. A woman claimed her brother and his friends did it.
But that lead went nowhere.
Right. Investigators checked it out, but ultimately ruled them out. It shows they were still looking, though.
And then came DNA technology.
Exactly. Big advancements. In 1989, the FBI tested a semen stain found on a pillowcase. It was from Michelle Guse's sleeping bag.
And the results?
It was a partial DNA match to Gene Leroy Hart.
Partial. What does that mean exactly?
Well, it means not all the genetic markers they look for were present or clear enough to analyze fully. So it wasn't a 100% definitive match like you might get today.
But it still pointed towards him.
Statistically, yeah. They said the profile would match only about 1 in 7,700 Native American men. Given Hart's background, the other evidence, it was a significant but not conclusive proof on its own.
Okay. And DNA tech kept improving, right? They tested again later.
They did, much more recently, in 2017, using more sophisticated methods.
And what did that show?
Sheriff Reed, the current sheriff, has said those results still strongly suggest Hart's involvement. Crucially, the newer tests didn't exclude Hart.
And did they exclude anyone else?
Yes, that's a key point he made. The testing apparently did exclude other people who had been considered potential suspects over the decades.
So it didn't definitively nail Hart, but it seemed to clear others.
Pretty much. It strengthens the case against him in the eyes of investigators, even without that full, perfect profile. But officially,
Yeah.
still inconclusive because it's partial.
And they apparently questioned a lot of people over the years.
Over 130 potential suspects, according to one source. So DNA helping to rule people out is a huge part of these cold case investigations.
It really shows the persistence, doesn't it? Law enforcement, the families, it's just not giving up.
Absolutely. Trying to use every tool available.
Okay, I want to shift back to something that happened before the murders. Something incredibly unsettling.
Ah, the note. Yeah.
Less than 2 months before the girls were killed, a camp counselor finds this handwritten note. It's inside an empty donut box.
And the note itself,
Yeah.
just chilling.
Yeah.
All capital letters.
It said, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in Tent 1.
Tent 1, not Tent 7, where Lori, Michelle, and Denise ended up staying.
But still, kill 3 girls. How was that note handled?
This is the part that's just hard to fathom. The camp session director at the time apparently thought it was just a prank.
A prank.
Yeah, dismissed it. Threw it away.
Threw it away. Oh my God, knowing what happened just weeks later.
Exactly. Well, hindsight is 20/20, of course, but you have to wonder what might have changed if that threat had been taken seriously,
Yeah.
investigated.
And the tent number difference, Tent 1 versus Tent 7, does that mean anything? Was it a mistake? A clue?
We'll probably never know for sure because it wasn't preserved or investigated. Was it the same person? Was it unrelated? Just another disturbing loose end in a case full of them.
Let's talk about the families. The sources really emphasize the ongoing impact, especially on Cherie and Beau Farmer Lori's parents.
Their story is just heartbreaking. Visiting the old campsite, which is all overgrown now, leaving roses, it's a powerful image of their grief.
And Cherie Farmer made a promise to Lori, didn't she?
She did. A promise to keep seeking justice, but also to do something positive in her memory. And she's absolutely channeled that grief into action.
Incredible action, really. They started the Oklahoma chapter of Parents of Murdered Children back in '84.
Providing support for other families going through that same nightmare. Just vital work.
And then, much more recently, Cherie led the campaign for Marsy's Law in Oklahoma.
Yeah, passed in 2018. It significantly strengthens victims' rights in the state's legal system, giving victims more standing, more information, more protection.
Turning her own tragedy into systemic change. That's remarkable dedication.
It really is. Ensuring victims' voices are heard, that they're not just bystanders in the process.
And Michelle Guse's father, Richard, was also involved in advocacy, wasn't he?
Yes, he helped get the Oklahoma Victims Bill of Rights passed earlier on and co-founded the Oklahoma Crime Victims Compensation Board.
So the families really united to push for change.
Definitely. A legacy born from unimaginable loss, but one that's helped countless others.
We also got a sense of the wider community's reaction from Lynn Lipinski's piece. She was a Girl Scout in Tulsa, the same age as one of the victims.
Yeah, her perspective was really insightful. She described this wave of fear that just washed over the community, especially for kids.
That feeling of safety, of childhood innocence, just shattered.
Completely.
Yeah.
Suddenly, the world felt dangerous in a way it hadn't before. Constant news coverage, everyone talking about it, freedom gone.
She also mentioned a book, Tent Number 8, and a psychologist's view on the killer's possible motivation.
Right, the idea of someone hating happiness, hating innocence, feeling inferior, and lashing out in this horrific way as revenge against, well, against decency itself.
A disturbing psychological angle, and she mentioned how the killer cleaned the scene somewhat, placed the bodies, suggesting maybe a need for control after the violence.
It's speculation, of course, but it tries to offer some kind of explanation for the inexplicable.
It's also strange hearing about those rumors after Hart died, about him having shape-shifting abilities from Cherokee traditions.
Yeah, that speaks volumes about how the community was trying to process it all, doesn't it? When answers are lacking, sometimes fear and folklore can kind of fill the vacuum. It's unsettling.
And Lipinski also highlighted the pressure on the sheriff at the time, Sheriff Weaver.
Finding a suspect in a case like this, the public demand for answers must have been intense. You can see how investigators might focus heavily on the most promising lead, especially with Hart's background.
So what happened to Camp Scott itself?
Closed immediately after the murders. Never reopened as a camp. It was sold off in 1988. It's apparently used as private hunting ground now. A very different purpose. A permanent, sad reminder.
But the case itself isn't technically closed, is it?
Officially, no. It remains open. Sheriff Reed has said that while he personally believes the evidence points strongly to Hart.
He's still open to new information if it comes forward.
Exactly. Keeping the door open, acknowledging there wasn't that final legal conviction for the murders.
And there's been a recent legal development that's brought the case back into focus, too.
That's right. The McGirt v. Oklahoma ruling from the Supreme Court.
How does that affect this case?
Well, it deals with tribal sovereignty and jurisdiction in Oklahoma. Since Hart was Cherokee and the crime happened on land considered historical Cherokee territory.
It means the Cherokee Nation now has jurisdiction to investigate.
Potentially, yes. It's prompted a new look at the case by the Cherokee Nation's authorities. It shows how legal changes can impact even very old cases.
Fascinating. And finally, this case has obviously captured public attention over the years, leading to documentaries.
Definitely. There was one back in '93, Someone Cried for the Children. And then the more recent Hulu series, Keeper of the Ashes.
Hosted by Kristen Chenoweth.
Right, and she actually had a connection to the camp. She was supposed to go that summer but got sick. Adds a very personal layer to it.
Wow. Yeah, those documentaries help keep the story alive, keep people aware.
For sure. They explore the details, the questions for new audiences.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what are the key takeaways from this deep dive? We have the horrific loss of 3 young girls, Lori, Michelle, and Denise.
We have the investigation focusing heavily on Gene Leroy Hart, an escaped convict with a violent past, linked by circumstantial evidence like the tape and photos.
But then his acquittal at trial, which was just devastating for the families, followed by his death soon after.
Then the DNA evidence emerges years later. Suggestive, points towards Hart, excludes others, but remains partial, not fully conclusive.
And that incredibly disturbing detail of the threatening note, found beforehand but dismissed as a prank, leaving that lingering question of what if.
The profound, lasting impact on the families, who channeled their grief into incredible advocacy for victims' rights.
And the deep scar left on the community, the loss of innocence described so vividly.
So the biggest takeaway maybe is the enduring mystery. Despite strong suspicion about Hart, the lack of a final legal answer, combined with things like the note, just leaves this space for doubt. What exactly happened?
It really highlights the difference between strong suspicion and absolute proof, especially in a legal sense, and the pain that uncertainty causes.
Absolutely.
But if there's a lasting legacy beyond the tragedy itself, it has to be Sherry Farmer's dedication.
Without a doubt.
Oh.
Her promise to Lori, her work for parents of murdered children, pushing for Marsy's Law. It's a powerful testament to fighting for something positive in the face of the absolute worst.
Honoring her daughter by making a difference for others, it's truly inspiring.
It really is. Resilience and strength.
And just a reminder, if anyone listening might have any information, even something that seems small, about the Camp Scott murders from 1977, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, the OSBI, can be reached at 405-848-6724.
Yeah, any piece could potentially matter. This case really drives home the long shadow such crimes cast, doesn't it? On lives, on a community. The search for truth, for closure, continues even after all this time. Remembering those girls, Lori, Mikkel, and Denise, is crucial.